have to be part of the society, the community, and the context in which we operate. And we have to pay attention to that and work with it if we want to be successful. So within this all, the notion of your careers and how to go big and not get fired is a very important, I think a crucial subject for anyone who has any degree of career salience.
Really what I would like to do is talk about your lives, because at the end of the day you spend more time sitting in your working chair, no matter what you do, than you probably spend in your bed. And what I hope to do today is to give you the cheat sheet of how to do it properly. And then there's a bonus piece, which is when you're in the role, what not to do. Okay? Often what happens is executives or managers are so busy performing that they actually don't take the time out to develop their own plan. So let's talk about the environment, let's talk about how you manage yourself on the playing field, let's talk about some of the rules that no one may have ever told you before, and then I'll share with you what not to do when you get in the role. The CEO comes along, and we're talking about senior, middle, upper management to senior executives. Comes along, someone's left, they've retired, they've been poached somewhere else, they've immigrated, unfortunately, and you now have a gap. First thing they do is the CEO scratches his head and said, who do I know? It's the first thing that happens. Why? It's free. Then they call the exco in, and they have a discussion. They say, geez, we're in trouble, we need to fix this role. Who do all of you guys know? And so they throw the net a little bit wider. And I guess that's why, to a certain degree, people talk about networking, right? Because if you're not known by those people, how are you going to be called for the opportunity? So there are essentially three types of executive recruitment that you need to be aware of. The first is what we call first-generation network-orientated headhunting. And that's this network game that I've implied to you. And what do we have today? Second-generation database recruitment industry. Still alive and kicking today, and probably has touched most of you in this room. And it works in various guises. It's modernizing all the time. But it only works from about 300,000 Rand cost to company to around about 750,000 Rand cost to company. So if you are ratcheting up your career, you're in your 20s or maybe your early 30s, and you're looking for a role in that bracket, those are the right guys to work for. So if you're planning to go big, you first have to understand where are you on the scale. And based on where you are on the scale and where you're trying to go, understand which channel or which playing field you're going to access. And each of these channels require you to present yourself, your information, and what you're trying to achieve differently. Otherwise, you'll fail. So what did she say? She said by doing focused market research, we will understand what's required, and then we will pinpoint and identify those individuals with the skill set required for the clients, wherever they happen to be. And in many cases, by the way, and here's the trick, you won't even know we're looking at you. Which is going to come to your strategy to go big, because guess what? Putting up your hand and saying, I'm ready to go big, you think that's going to work for you? It's not going to work for you. So we're going to talk about how to do this a little bit later. Certainly at a research-based search level, we don't just go to the competitors and find the finance manager in beverages in the competitor to SAB and say, well, there's one candidate. We ask ourselves, where in the entire economy will we find individuals with the right skill set that the client is asking for? Certainly it comes into the strategy that a business like ours will employ to bring in what we call sometimes the wild cards. So certainly on a search, I look at the obvious candidates, I look at the next ring out, the less obvious candidates that require lateral thinking, and then we have a third layer, which is who are the wild cards? Who are individuals we know that could do this that are not necessarily meeting all the stated criteria? But there's still a couple of critical things you've got to do to get on those lists, and that's what I'm going to try to help you with. But the critical thing is most guys who are making it happen are not in the market looking for jobs, are not unemployed, okay, saying, but I'm great, pick me. So I say to my execs and my managers that I talk with who are interested in furthering their career, rule number one according to Woodburn, don't get unemployed. If you're managing your career, think very, very carefully about taking a voluntary break. Because for your personal reasons, it might be hugely valuable. But if you're trying to go big and be that CEO, it might not necessarily be the right path to be taken. How do you explode your career? This is how you get to be one of those individuals who gets noticed. And it's critical. In a portion of your career, you have to have done the following. Been able to identify a problem, innovate a solution, implement the solution, measure the result, tweak it, and remeasure it. Because as a senior executive, you may be called on to do just one of those pieces at any point in time. So if you've never practiced it previously, how are you going to do it when you become director X, Y, or Z? The problem being is 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds are now have a whole different agenda and are not being told this little trick. And will end up then in their late 30s wondering why they can't be promoted or they're not being successful. And you can go and read many, many books about this, Good to Great, all the rest of them. They will tell you there is no substitute for time at the coalface. And my other piece of advice is do it when you're young, where enduring hardship is easier to manage than when you've got 3 kids and you're trying to put them through private school. It doesn't matter who you are or how well connected you are, sooner or later, if you try to take a fast one, it will get found out. That's the only thing I can say to you. But certainly, we've worked for clients in Africa who are quite clear that they will not hire anybody who's been remotely touched by any kind of scandal, corrupt dealing, tenderpreneuring, you name it. And it's our job to investigate the market and to investigate anybody we interview at a level that will find this out before you even get to be interviewed by the client. And I have to say that I believe honesty is the best policy. Rather say it out up front before you get caught. And we know that critical competencies that lead to success are creativity and innovation. Creativity is finding a new idea. Innovation is converting it to commercial success. And the one thing I've got to tell you here is it doesn't matter what job you're in. My one piece of advice is at any point in time you should always have one, what I call shoot the lights out idea that you're working on in parallel. If you don't have one of those and you say, but I'm just a tax expert, I'm not asked to do that, how are you going to go big? You're just going to be doing what people have told you to do. So that's what you've got to do. And remember I said we're going to find you. So if you do all 7, we'll be finding you. If you're not doing all 7, do you think you're going to be surprised that the phone never rings? So good talent acquisition organizations try to understand what the future need is going to be and hire to that. Unfortunately, it's a very rare approach to talent acquisition. Most people are stuck on the functional need. I need a tax guy, or I need a production guy, I need a supply chain guy, whatever it might be. And certainly, you've got 2 choices. I'm really pissed off with my boss and I'm not enjoying my job. Leave and let me figure out how to survive for 20 months before I get another one. Or let me figure out how to make it work where I am, become a star while I activate a process to find another opportunity. Which one do you think is a better one to work with? But God help you, don't just talk about you. You've got to move your thinking, and especially as students, it's all been about what am I learning. You've got to change your thinking to a transaction-based engagement. I'm going to give you this, and for that I'm going to get this. Now we're talking. And most 20-year-olds can't do it. In your 30s, what do you need? Because you now have growth in your skill set, in your area of experience. Because you guys have just got married, you've got a couple of kids, you want a fancy car, you want a bigger house, guess what you need? Cash. So do you think you should tell that to your potential employer? No. But I promise you, even if you didn't say it, it's quite clear. So you need to work hard at building a better transaction-based rapport with who you're going to work for. Okay? So in your 40s, it's about this leadership thing. And it's about proving yourself and driving the profit and turnarounds and things like that, and it does become good. In your 50s, what happens? In your 50s, often, the mindset turns to legacy and impact and an ability to make a difference, believe it or not. Why? You've learned your skills, you've acquired your money, and you've practiced the profit and loss, 20s, 30s, and 40s, roughly. Okay? But put yourself into whatever life stage you're in. And I'm giving you the cheat sheet now, because if you're in your 30s now, you will be 51 day, trust me. So remember this, okay? And work around what you know and what your life stage need is versus what the company needs and what the job needs. Now you've got an ability to engage with a potential employer or search individual at a real level. Don't try and bullshit. It's not going to cut it. It just doesn't cut it. And it's quite clear when someone listens to the question and answers it truthfully and well versus someone who's blowing hot air. I promise you. You can see it night and day. Then let's talk about the all-serving CV. You know about this all-serving CV, right? You're all working on yours all the time. Am I right? And you all want to know what's the perfect CV. Am I right? It's not really that important. Okay? We get everything from 1 pages to 10 pages. Around about 2 to 3 in whatever format you've got is about right. Why? I'm not worried about whether you've got a picture of yourself or whatever. The content is critical. Where did you work? What did you achieve? What dates? Where's your education from? Pretty much is what we want to know. Because we know other stuff about you that you're not telling us on the CV too. Because remember, we found you. Don't think you're smarter than the system and you can play it. Don't sign contracts and break the contract. Don't do it. Stick to your values. I promise you, you've got a long career. Messing it up once will come back and bite you. Right, what could go wrong? I'll tell you what can go wrong. Lominger that I've mentioned, the Global Leadership Competency Framework, has done 40 plus years of research on people, executive behaviors, and leadership competence. And we know people fail for 2 reasons. Does that make sense? Pretty much, right? And most people go to work on a daily basis, and in most cases they probably have a niggle if they're not getting on with someone. That's the trouble with people. But do they do much about it? Well, if your ego has anything to do with it, you're now at war, right? And then I always like to believe that in your heart of hearts you know whether you're delivering or not. Certainly to this audience, I would like to make that assumption. It's different. Trouble with results is different to working hard. So if you can't relate well to others, probably some people here do that, but it's unlikely to be very, very harmful. At an extreme, it can lead to an exit. But the quick fix for being self-centered is awareness, and the even quicker fix, if you have low levels of awareness, is to do the following. Please give me feedback. Ask for feedback. It's the simple solution. Problem solved. But it's the inability to inspire and build teams. And it's not a short-term impact. It's a medium to long-term impact. And those of you in larger businesses will know that there's a lot of discussion that goes on and on and on about this. But this is critical. And if you don't, or if you're not aware of it, it can certainly lead to you not achieving what you're trying to do, because you can't do everything on your own. But as you get more senior in organizations and the pressure increases to deliver on your results, guess what happens? You become narrowly focused on the target that you're committed to. And when that happens, you actually put at risk your ability to deliver results. Remember, in our process, we talk to the client first, right? And the critical thing we want to find out there is, what is the culture of the client? You know, is it an autonomous organization? Is it democratic? Is it autocratic? Is it command and control? What is their culture that works for them? There's no point in putting a highly democratic person into a command and control culture, because they're going to fail. It'll be organ rejection. It's a match between the organization that a candidate will go to and how the candidate works. Now, how do we assess it? Was your next part of your question? We do it in the following way. First of all, in interviews, we have the ability to ask competency-based questioning, which has been scientifically done, where we ask you, give us an example of where you did this or that or whatever. And what we're listening for is a theme-based answer. The detail isn't important. We listen for themes. And we know which themes illustrate you have that competence and which themes in your answer illustrate you don't. So that's the first way we do it. Second way we do it is we ask you overtly, do you lead anyone? Personally, do you lead anyone? Do you have a team that... Okay, so I ask you in an interview, tell me, if I were to ask your people, how they would describe your style of leadership. And now I'm going to get the self answer, right? Which we know is the least accurate, by the way. The boss's answer is always the best. Then I can do a reference on you. And I want in the reference an ex-boss of yours, or your current boss, if for some reason that's applicable. And I will ask the boss how they perceive you to be leading. Okay? So, and then finally, if you're the final preferred candidate, we may send you for a massive bank of psychometrics. And in there are things like the advanced managerial, and there can be case studies, there can be role play, there can be various other things. So because of the easy to hire and possible to fire process our country has, companies invest a lot up front to try and make sure that they are, someone over there was a bit worried about ticking the boxes, but to get rid of a senior executive, you're going to pay a lot of money if he doesn't get it right. You rather want to spend a few thousand rand up front, as close as damn it, checking on as much as you can. First thing is what we do is we will match what he claims against the CV. And believe it or not, you'll be surprised how many people shoot themselves in the foot. They write stuff on the CV. I'm sitting in the interview with the CV in front of me, and I ask a question, and the answer isn't what's written on the CV. Duh, but it happens. Remember, I said you return to type, so if you bullshit on the CV, when you're under pressure in the interview, the likelihood that you're going to remember exactly what you bullshitted me on the CV, it's not going to happen. Just don't do it. So that's the first indicator. Second indicator, often, is when they don't answer the question. So what was the turnover? What was the profit? What happened in the turnaround? What happened when you had to cut those heads? And the answer is this waffly, non-cement answer. You were the guy in the CV who claimed to have done it, and we're looking for a guy who can do that, and yet you can't give me the answer, but you did it. Another alarm bell goes off. And that happens down in your 20s. You're sitting in front of a graduate recruit, you finished your MBA, you now want to get into Tiger Brands or wherever, and you get there and you ask the question and you waffle. Listen, figure out what they want, give them the answer, and then like I did with you, has that answered the question? Critical. And then we will catch the rest in references and in the psychometrics often. And remember, that's even before the client gets to interview you. You're not the only one to ask it, because that is the question senior executives ask, the following way you do it. I said there are 3 routes to generate an opportunity. The first is your network. But, I say limit it to between 3 and 5 individuals who are highly trustworthy. In other words, you go to your mentors, you go to ex-bosses, investors, whatever, and you say, this is what I'm looking for. Let me know if you find that opportunity. What you don't want them to do is think they're helping you and spread your name around town, because that turns you creating an opportunity into you being desperate. Number 2 is you cherry pick some guys like us or a recruitment agency. Remember those channels I shared with you? You identify the channel, you know which one's going to be right for you and where you're working, and then you send in the all-powerful CV and you attempt to get some airtime with them. Often, if you've passed the decade of employment, a couple of things happen. And I'm not going to make a judgment whether they're good or bad, okay? But a couple of things happen. The first thing that happens is, actually, you've got such deep knowledge of the organization that you can almost navigate problems, people, and challenges unconsciously. Because you've been there so long, right? You almost know what will work and what won't work before you try. Which is a good thing in optimization, but if you're stuck and you have to move to a new environment, you can't trade on that subconscious knowledge any longer. You've got to redevelop it. So that's the flip side of this thing. Around about 10 years, I say you've got to be careful. I'm not saying don't spend 25 years in an organization. I know people who've been brilliant in their careers and have never left one organization. Okay? But I'm just saying roughly that 10-year period of time is a time that if you don't leave, you should have in the back of your mind, I might end up being here a long time. Okay? And this is an unintended consequence of transformation, where certain individuals have experienced accelerated development. They've left behind that grease under the fingernails, hands on the workbench time. They never did it. And then when they land up right up high, they end up making decisions that lead to failure. So my suggestion to you is assess your career. Have I spent long enough in an organization to have done that value chain is the first question. And then my other question is, if we get a CV of a 36-year-old who's had 5 jobs each for 2 years, I can tell you now that at senior management and executive level, our clients certainly think twice about even seeing that person. So I'd say a minimum period of time you spend in a job is 2 years, but preferably in your career you want to exhibit 1 4-year or 5-year stint somewhere. Even if you've been promoted. Breweries was famous for moving guys around. So they did different jobs, but they were committed, they had depth in the organization, they understood the strategy, and they were given a chance to actually have a go. And that's why I asked you guys up front, who is driving their careers according to a strategy, and who is letting life happen to them? Because guess what? The guys who need a lot of strikes, let life happen to them. And is that the guy that I want to give my balance sheet to be a future director of my company? Not necessarily. So everything you do is going to be looked at, inclusive of your Facebook profile. So don't put silly stuff in social media.